we are Tim and Emily Miller. We're going to take a few minutes to talk about some of the things that were going on in our lives during the season where the songs that now make up our first project, One Hope, One Boast, came forth. Well, it was a long season, probably over 2 or 3 years even, beginning with our first time in Minneapolis. We were initially in South Minneapolis, in Bloomington, connecting with a community there. Some people who have since then become some of our closest friends at the Bethany community. And then we were in downtown Minneapolis after that, taking a season for prayer, focused prayer and intercession, as well as reaching out in the downtown Phillips community with some other close friends of ours, Henry and Annalise Bruno, their 2 oldest girls. They were the only 2 kids they had at the time. And Nance Cogshaw, another good friend of ours. And then Duluth, Minnesota. And then we were in Kenya for a time. And then also, after coming back to Kenya, back from Kenya, time in Kansas City, a time in New York and New Jersey and Kentucky. So obviously, for that particular season, especially over that few-year period, we did a lot of itinerating as part of our ministry, teaching in churches, Bible teaching, some missions, training, things like that, developing curriculum. So these songs in this particular first project, they have a rich context, lots of different places. So we'll share some of the highlights. Obviously, we can't talk about everything that was going on during the time that these songs were coming forth, but some of the things, we're just kind of doing this spontaneously. So some of the things that come to our mind, we'll share. I do want to say, as I was putting together some of the lyrics videos for this first project, I felt what I think was a really good pain in my heart as I was listening to those songs. As you're listening and maybe working through some of the songs, you'll notice probably a couple of things. Number one, they're longer than most of the songs in the other projects we've done. And number two, they're a lot more raw worship. And as I was listening to those, I just felt the pain of, oh Lord, I never want to lose the heart of worship that was really burning bright in my heart during the time that we were writing those songs. Probably more than any other season, that was a season where I just felt a hunger for worship. And so those songs on this first project, a lot of them are really long compared to a lot of the other songs we've written. One of the reasons is because so many of them emerged from long prayer meetings. And when you're praying for extended periods of time, you keep singing choruses and various things come forth. And so a lot of times very simple chord progressions, some of them not very complex songs musically, but just the raw desire in our hearts and the worship. I think of You Alone, down in downtown downtown Minneapolis, with Henry and Annalise and Nance, and just the, we were living in community at the time, gathering every morning for worship times, and just, after 3 or 4 prayer meetings, in a week, just crying out for God to give us hunger to continue seeking Him in worship, and crying out in prayer and intercession for the downtown Phillips neighborhood, which is one of the most diverse neighborhoods in the U.S. A lot of peoples represented there, languages, ethnic groups of all kinds from all over the world. As we were interceding for the various peoples there and trying to reach out in the community, we would just sing out, God, give us more of you, increase our appetite for you, so that whatever sharing we did do, we wanted it to come out of that place of overflow after being in His presence and seeking His face in prayer and intercession. And that's just one example of all of the songs on this first project. Again, just that raw worship and crying out to the Lord for often extended periods of time. So Emily, I'll just turn it over to you. Anything that's coming to your mind from any of these places we work?
Yeah, several places we were in. We were having times of often prayer times and worship times with family in our home, especially downtown Minneapolis, I'm thinking of. And those times were really, really great, but really messy, actually, and honestly, like we had little kids at the time, and so one minute you would have the 2-year-old spinning circles worshiping the Lord, and the next minute they're taking each other's favorite scarf, and like it just was raw, and I really felt like I needed to highlight that because I want to give the impression that it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to look cookie cutter. Like, you have to just do it and live life the way that life rolls with little kids. Like, you just have to be able, you can't just sit back at home because your kids are little and not engage and not take part. You just have to be up in the middle of it and solve the disputes and move on. Like, okay, forgive each other, now let's go back to worship time. And so we had a lot of that, and it was really good, and I think a lot of growth and maturity in my own heart and life from that season, as well as our kids. I feel like our kids learned a lot about growing in love with each other and the Lord through the worship times and through the working out stuff as we went. So
Yeah, and in that particular context, we went in with the Brunos and Nance and on this big house, and it was we were able to kind of section off the house, but we all shared a kitchen. And for anybody who's lived in close proximity with people before, you're doing the kitchen dance, and you realize that when you're living in close proximity to other people, that it requires an increased amount of self-denial and laying down your life and not making a big deal out of little things, and clear communication. We're doing laundry at this time, you guys are doing laundry at this time, and then of course kids, there's always trying to be able to shepherd our kids well through those situations. And what I was so thankful for, as songs like "You Alone" were coming forth. I'm thinking of some of the other ones. "I Will Leave Babylon Behind." That one began in that house, and then it continued on in Duluth when we lived in another community situation with Richie and Grace Parks and their kids, and in an even bigger house up in Duluth. This really old house that we found. And when you're worshiping and seeking the Lord together in those situations, the Lord, it just requires an accelerated grace in seeking His face, seeking communication, being quick to not take offense at little things and things that you need to repent of, being quick to repent of those things. And the Lord really, I felt, used that season to knit our hearts really closely with the people in these various places where we lived in community. And not easy, not by any means, but I always I say to people, if you keep the cross before you and you have your own bathroom, then you can get through about anything. And but not just get through seasons, but really come away loving the people that you've run with. And I feel like the people that we built deep relationships with in this particular 2 or 3 year window of this project are some of our dearest relationships in the world. The Lord has really built close bonds. And even before we moved downtown with the Brunos and Nance, we got to know a really amazing group of people at Bethany. That's where one of the first songs I wrote on that project, Resurrection. It was such a sweet season where the Lord was really kindling a fire in all of our hearts about the hope to come and the resurrection unto life, and the day when Jesus is going to come back and restore all things. 1 Peter, the gracious salvation to be given, or excuse me, I think that's 2 Peter. No, 1 Peter 1:13. The grace to salvation, the grace to be given us when Jesus Christ is revealed, and it was just a real precious season in that way. And I also one particular memory I have after we were in downtown Minneapolis with the Bruno family and with Nance. We were in Duluth with the Parks. I remember the Easter, we were there for Easter Sunday, and that's where the song I'm Alive, technically it's called I'm Alive, but all the kids call it Mary Mary because that's the first line of the song. They all remember it as Mary Mary. But Emily, do you want to share anything about kind of that's Easter Sunday?
Yeah, we had a sweet time with the Parks. I probably won't remember all the details, but I know that we went to the beach and had some worship time at the beach on Lake Superior. And I remember we reenacted the empty tomb, and Arden Arden Parks was put in the tomb, and then went out the back way or something, and then the empty tomb. And so the kids really got into it, and it was really a lot of fun. And we wrote the song there on Easter, right?
Well, yeah, I think we had a worship time that morning, and we just started singing about the resurrection events, and they just kept coming, and there was so much grace on it, and the kids were having so much fun. And I think even to this day, that is maybe one of the top songs that the kids really love. There's just something about that song that the kids really love, get excited about. And you know, sometimes they'll ask you, can we do Mary Mary again? And you're kind of thinking, Mary Mary again. But the fact that they're still excited about the resurrection and all that happened and the appearances of Jesus, this man really is alive, the first fruits of the resurrection, that we have a real living example that of what was promised to Abraham and the patriarchs and prophesied by the prophets. Like, this thing really is going to take place. We have a real first fruits example of the promises, the restoration of all things to come. And could you imagine how that galvanized this group of Jewish believers who'd been putting their faith in the promises for so long, to have a real example of a taste of what is coming when we who are united with Christ will receive our own resurrected bodies. To see the kids excited about that, even after all of these years of singing this song. So that was, and then I think at the beach, we went to the beach later on that day, and I think, was that when we did Jesus come out of did we do a resurrection cake or something to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus? Yeah, that was it.
We stole the idea from the Harrigans, but we basically made a chocolate cake and then cut a hole in it and put a little wooden figure down in there and tied a clear string to him and then frosted the cake. And so then we were able to pull him out, and he came up out of the ground cake. And it was a lot of fun. The kids remember that really well too.
So yeah, and the same in Kenya when we were there. Just a number of songs that came forth there. I mean, you'll notice that it's probably like 50 million songs that we put on that project, and that's because we were in 50 million places before we got the idea. Hey, why don't we record some of these things? And the Lord opened the door for us to do some kind of basic recordings for them. But again, just that season where worship was just, there was so much life on our prayer meetings, and sometimes it just was raw, pressing through. It wasn't, I don't want to create an exaggerated picture. There were times where just, you're praying because the Lord wants us to pray, but other times where His presence was really sweet. We had some really sweet times with believers in different churches in Kenya. I was doing a lot of traveling at that time, doing some teaching and things. But the song, what is it? To You I Call, that was a Kenya song. And just the cry for mercy. Psalm 28 was the real basis for the chorus of that song. I'm trying to think now. Then we came back from our time in Kenya, and we were in Kansas City for a time and got to meet some amazing believers and who are now dear friends of ours up in the New York, New Jersey area, and then ended up, I think the final songs that we put on that particular album was we wrote them in our coming back to Kentucky to be near our families for a season. Son of Man, I believe, Set My Heart Ablaze. And again, as I'm thinking about these songs and memories are coming to my mind, I just feel this like, oh God, don't let me lose that heart of worship that has burned so bright in the past, and since that season we've had some really intense trials, and you start to realize, wait a minute, like Jesus' warnings in the parable of the sower, like when difficulty came and the sun came out and that when the pressures came, it scorched the plants, or the anxieties and the cares of this age, the thorns choking out the plants. You start to say, wow, that I see why he gave those warnings, because there have been times where I felt those types of things kind of putting pressure on, and over time you start to feel weary and wonder, is my heart really where it needs to be with the Lord? And so I think about songs like Watch and Pray. I remember that particular season. That was in the downtown Minneapolis Duluth season. I just felt like there was so much spiritual warfare and just constant, like, just saying no to the temptations that are common to men, that the Lord, He's promised to make a way of escape. Well, that was a season where just there's whatever was behind all of that, we just felt this attack from the enemy at every turn, and we just responded by seeking the Lord in prayer and watching and praying, and sin is crouching at my door. It desires to have me, but I'm going to watch and pray and ask the Lord for grace and power to say no to the deeds and the lusts of the flesh. So, as I'm talking, I'm just like, Lord, reignite that in my heart. Would you pray for anybody who might happen to come upon these songs, and pray for the Lord to give them grace?
Lord, I thank you so much that we are, despite all the difficulties of this age, God, it's a wonderful time, God, that we can be here praying on this video, and
yes,
who
Lord,
knows who will have access to it, and who will watch it, and I pray, God, that it would strengthen and encourage hearts.
Yes,
God.
Lord Jesus.
I pray that
yes,
anyone who's watching this, God, as they watch this video or as they listen to these songs, God, that you would strengthen them.
Yes, Father.
God, that you would root them and ground them in your love.
Yes, Lord.
That they would hold firm and fast to you, Jesus, in the difficult times that are coming, God.
Yes, Father.
Before your return, Lord, and I pray that they would hold fast to you,
yes,
that they would cling to you, cling
yes,
to your
Father.
cross, Lord, and just give them grace and strength in Jesus' name. Amen.
Father's right hand, so by the power of His prayers we take